was a cool autumn evening. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the plains of Texas, where the vast sky met the endless earth. The wind whispered secrets, rustling through the tall grass, a sound that was both inviting and foreboding. In a clearing, a girl played. Her laughter echoed like music, a bright contrast to the muted colors of the landscape. This girl, with hair that danced in the gentle breeze, had never known the story of her beginnings. Raised by settlers, her world consisted of small gardens, the warmth of a family hearth, and the children of the nearby homestead. But her heart would one day be drawn back into the wildness of the world, a world she barely knew, but one that held truths buried deep beneath the surface. On that very day, a Comanche warrior named Cochise moved silently through the tall grass. Cloaked in the colors of the earth, he was a hunter, a guardian, and a leader. His muscles coiled like springs, ready for action, his spirit fierce and unyielding. The Comanche were masters of the plains, skilled in the ways of nature and deeply connected to their land. Cochise had earned his status, not just through strength, but through wisdom and loyalty to his people. As Cochise stalked his prey, he caught a fleeting glimpse of the girl's laughter like a beacon amidst the vast wilderness. The sound stirred something in him, a curiosity that ignited a spark he thought was long extinguished. He had seen settlers before, mostly with disdain. They encroached upon his people's land, scattering herds and disrupting age-old traditions. But this girl, she was different. There was something innocent in her joy, something pure that called out to him across the divide of cultures. As the sky deepened into shades of twilight, Cochise watched her interact with the other children. They danced and played near the fire, their faces illuminated by flickering flames. He felt a weight in his chest, a longing to understand not just her world but his own in contrast. In those precious moments, he could sense a conflict brewing. Lives intertwined, yet worlds apart. Days passed, and curiosity turned to obsession. Cochise followed her from a distance, never too close, always hidden in the shadows. He observed the way she took care of her younger siblings, her laughter spilled over like sunlight. And in the silence of that golden hour, he began to dream, a flickering thought that perhaps two worlds could meet, could blend instead of collide. But reality was harsh, and it weighed heavy on his heart. Then came the day that changed everything. A bitter chill hung in the air as dusk fell. The settlers were finishing their work, the sound of axes and laughter filling the space around them. But suddenly, jagged war cries pierced the raiding party of rival tribes descended like a storm. Chaos erupted, horses reared, voices screamed in panic. Cochise, witnessing the turmoil, saw the girl's bright spirit flash momentarily in the midst of a tempest. She was separated from her family in the fray, her innocence shattering in an instant. Time became a blur. In his heart, Cochise felt a calling, a primal urge that could not be ignored. Without thinking, he sprinted toward the clearing, moving like a shadow through the panic and disorder. He was no longer merely a spectator, but a participant bound by a fierce sense of duty. His body tensed, preparing for both fight and flight as he approached. He spotted her, a small figure trembling amid the chaos, fear etched in her features as raiders closed in. Something pulled at him, a force he couldn't name. Was it honor, compassion, or perhaps love, the kind that blossoms unexpectedly in the heart? With a sudden burst of focus, he took action. In one swift motion, he lunged forward, sweeping the girl into his arms just as danger zoomed past. The raiders had seen him, but in that moment, all that existed was the warmth of her small body clutched against his chest. The world fell silent for a heartbeat, and in that brief pause, something magical happened. She looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes, and he felt a swirl of emotions, fear, hope, and an unquenchable desire to protect. He turned, his warrior's instincts surging as he sprinted back through the chaos, the cries of anger and anguish chasing them like wolves behind a lone deer. He raced across the plains, the wind biting at his skin, but he felt none of it. In this moment, the only thing that mattered was keeping her safe. His heart beat in time with the rhythm of her breath. She was terrified, trembling, yet there was no scream on her lips, only a whisper of trust in her eyes. They ran, darting between trees and over hills, the shadows casting them into anonymity. Behind them, the chaos of battle faded, but the tension hung in the air like a thread waiting to snap. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached a hidden cave where he set her down gently. It was dark inside, cool and still, a stark contrast to the world outside. Her eyes widened in the pitch-black space, fear creeping back in. For a moment it felt as if the walls were closing in. Cochise sensed her panic. He knelt down, bringing his face close to hers. With a soft voice, he whispered words she couldn't understand but felt in the depths of her being a promise of safety, a tether of reassurance. She nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding passing between them. In that moment, they became something more than just a Comanche warrior and a settler's child. They were human, united in a shared experience bound by danger and bravery. As the darkness settled around them, Cochise shared stories and gestures, mimicking the world they had escaped from: the laughter of children, the warmth of a fire, the joy of love. She listened, her eyes wide with wonder, captivated by the tales of spirits and the landscapes of her ancestry. Bit by bit, the walls of difference began to melt away. Days turned into nights within the cave as they hid from the chaos outside. The girl learned to understand Cochise in ways she couldn't have imagined. The warrior, with every word, taught her about the connection to the land, about the spirits of nature that danced in the winds. She felt her own spirit awakening, resonating with the song of the plains. But as the days blurred into each other, a crack of reality began to pierce their fragile bubble. She missed her family, their voices, the safety of community. And Cochise felt the weight of a world pulling on his shoulders, reminding him of his people and the struggles that awaited him outside the veil of protection he had created. One evening, the air thick with the scent of rain, she turned to him with a fierce determination that illuminated her young face. She wanted to go back. They needed to reach her family to heal the wound that had torn them apart. It was both a heartbreaking and hopeful moment, a desire crystallizing in both their hearts. Cochise's chest tightened at the thought of returning her. He feared what her people would think of him, a native warrior who had circumstantially saved a settler's daughter. Would they see him as a hero, or would the scars of conflict overshadow his deeds? But he could not let his fear dictate her choices. While the storm rumbled outside, they set out early the next morning. They moved through the shadows, blending into the landscape as they navigated back toward her village. Each step was a reminder of the tenuous peace they had constructed, a bridge spanning the divide between their worlds. Finally, they reached the outskirts of the settlement, the smell of smoke and the sounds of life growing louder. Hope and dread churned in Cochise's heart. He had protected her, held her close, witnessed a bond that had grown unexpectedly strong. Yet here they stood, a Comanche and a settler, on the precipice of a new beginning or ruin. With a deep breath, he guided her into the clearing, the familiar structure of her home coming into view. Her family was there, their faces a mixture of shock and relief, but soon transformed into a flurry of emotions. Laughter, tears, and embraces filled the air, washing over him like a wave. As they celebrated her return, Cochise remained in the shadows, watching quietly, heart stirring with a bittersweet ache. He had risked everything, crossed unthinkable boundaries, and yet how would they accept him? Those two simple words, once a foreign language, carried the weight of their shared experience, an unspoken vow that transcended words. The girl he had saved had become a part of his life, just as he had become part of hers. But just as he turned to leave, her voice rang out. In that ethereal moment, he felt the truth of the world seep into his bones. Two souls from different worlds had collided. A bond created out of chaos could not be severed by destiny. "Whenever the winds call," he replied, the weight of his promise hanging in the air like a fragile thread woven between their paths. And with that, Cochise slipped into the shadows once more. The Comanche warrior faded into the dusk, but the connection between him and the girl remained a bond forged in love, strength, and freedom. The plain spread wide before him, a canvas of endless possibilities, but one thing echoed deep in his heart. Sometimes, the paths of two worlds can merge, igniting a journey that neither had ever expected. In the annals of history, their story would not be forgotten, kept alive by the whispers of the wind and the laughter of the children who played freely among the tall grass. Two spirits, forever changing one another, forever intertwined. A gust of wind whipped across the Texas plains, stirring the golden grasses like waves on a vast sea. Beneath the sprawling sky, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over a small, modest cabin. Laughter echoed from inside, the joyous voices of children unblemished by the troubles of the outside world. Yet, something dark loomed at the edges of the horizon, something that would change everything in an instant. Inside that cabin, a girl named Ella brushed her hair, humming a tune that danced with the rhythm of her heart. Raised by settlers, Ella knew nothing of her true history, nor the wilderness just outside her door. But that evening held a strange tension in the air, as if nature itself were holding its breath. Just then, loud cracks split the calm gunfire echoed across the plains, plunging the carefree atmosphere into chaos. Shouts erupted, children screamed, and the intimacy of the cabin shattered into panic. Settlers were under attack. A rival band of raiders descended upon them savage and relentless. Amid the commotion, Ella was separated from her family, lost in the blur of faces and fear. She darted from room to room, her small heart pounding, calling out for her mother, but her voice drowned in the clamor. Outside, the raiders moved like shadows, striking fear into the hearts of the settlers. Among them was a Comanche warrior named Nico, tall and fierce, with muscles honed from a lifetime of survival in the untamed wilderness. He had grown up watching his world slowly fracture, feeling the weight of a relentless conflict between his people and the encroaching settlers. Today was no different. He had come to defend his territory and his tribe. But as Nico circled the settlement, he caught sight of the girl. Ella, a small figure against the chaos, her face streaked with dirt and fear. It was her helplessness that seized his heart, a feeling that churned and swirled like a storm within him. He was a warrior, raised to fight, but something about her vulnerability called out to him. It was a moment so unexpected, it reverberated through him, awakening a compassion buried beneath the weight of duty. Seeing her standing alone, trembling and searching, made Nico's blood boil. He was torn. Loyalty to his people clashed with an instinct to protect the innocent. Before he could even think, his feet moved, propelled by an unnameable urge. With swift grace, Nico sprinted toward Ella, weaving through the chaos. Armed with nothing but his instincts and a knife strapped to his hip, he repeated a silent mantra, urging himself to reach her before it was too late. The noise of battle roared around him, but his world narrowed down to that singular focus: save her, protect her. He reached her just as a raider loomed closer, his eyes wild with greed. Nico arrived like a thunderclap, pushing Ella behind him with a fierce protective stance. The world swirled around them, screams of fear, blasts of gunfire, and the acrid scent of smoke. Nico didn't hesitate. He met the raider's gaze with icy determination. Then, in one swift motion, he lashed out, neutralizing the threat before it could touch her. Time slowed as he faced the danger with a fierce intensity that sent adrenaline coursing through him. The raider fell, and Nico turned his attention back to Ella, who looked at him wide-eyed, the fear slowly melting into a flicker of trust. "Stay close," Nico urged, his voice steady despite the chaos, and with that he grabbed her hand and took off into the wild, away from the clamor of destruction. Heart pounding, he could feel her tiny fingers clutching his tightly, as if she believed he could lead her to safety. They dashed through the trees, the underbrush whispering around them, a world of shadows and unknowns. Behind them, the sounds of fighting faded into the distance, but the tension clung to them like a storm cloud. Nico kept running, each step fueled by the will to shield this girl, a flicker of innocence amidst the violence. He moved swiftly, guided by instinct and the knowledge of the land he had roamed his entire life. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the darkness enveloped them, wrapping around their bodies like a protective cloak. Moments turned into hours, but Nico had no intention of stopping. He would not rest until he was sure they were far from the danger. Finally, they stumbled upon a small, hidden cave, a sanctuary carved into the earth, shielded from the prying eyes of both settlers and raiders. Nico ushered Ella inside, cautiously scanning their surroundings. The heart of the storm was still far off, but they needed a moment to breathe, a moment to gather their strength. He crouched down, placing himself at her eye level. "You're safe now," he said softly, his voice a soothing balm to her frayed nerves. In that space of darkness, Ella shook slightly, her body still trembling from the shock of it all. He whispered words in his language, comforting sounds meant to ease her mind. Yet Ella's eyes spoke the truth of her fear, and soon her voice broke through the silence. She asked, the innocence of her youth stark against the darkness they found themselves in. Nico realized she was more than just a child caught in conflict. She was a soul looking for solace amid chaos. He shook his head gently, laying a hand on her shoulder with the utmost care. "No," he promised. "You are strong." To him, those words rang true. He needed to believe it, not just for her, but for himself as well. As the hours passed, the cave became a fragile home, warmed by the flicker of a small fire. They talked in hushed tones, sharing bits of their worlds. Nico spoke of the vast plains where his people roamed, the beauty of a sunset that painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson. He told her of the stars, stories he'd heard from elders about the cosmos, each star a guardian watching over them. Ella, in return, painted a picture of her life before the chaos, her games with the other children, the aroma of bread baked by her mother, and laughter that filled the kitchen like warmth. For those moments, fear faded, replaced by connection, even though it was forged in the darkness of the world outside. But reality soon loomed again in the form of an unsettling silence. Days stretched into nights, and though they had forged an unexpected alliance, it became apparent they needed to find a way back to safety. Nico understood that he could not hide forever. His tribe needed him, and Ella needed to reunite with her family. They emerged from the cave, stepping into the vastness of the open plains. The sunlight warmed their skin, yet there was an air of uncertainty. Nico took a deep breath, focusing on the horizon as if summoning the spirits of the land to guide them. He glanced down at Ella, determination reflected in her eyes. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead. They navigated the wilds carefully. Nico's senses were sharp, scanning the area for signs of danger or the faintest whisper of approaching footsteps. Ella stayed close behind, picking flowers along the way, her resilience shining through each thoughtful gesture. It all felt surreal, an experience that should be marked by fear, yet there was something beautifully simple about their journey together. But fate is unkind when least expected. As they approached the edge of the settlement, Nico's heart raced with a mixture of hope and dread. He could hear the distant voices, the laughter that had once filled the air before the chaos. Ella looked up at him, her trust unquestionable, a bond unbreakable despite the world around them. Just as they stepped into the clearing, the tranquility shattered again. A band of horsemen, a raiding party not unlike the one that had attacked her home, rode toward them. Nico's instincts kicked in and he grabbed Ella's hand tightly, pulling her aside just as the horsemen charged. They had to act quickly, every heartbeat counted. Nico commanded, eyes blazing with resolve. They turned, sprinting into the safety of the trees, hearts pounding in rhythm, racing against time and fate. Nico moved forward, his body acting as a shield between Ella and danger, dodging blows and arrows as they fled deeper into the woods. In the chaos of the chase, something shattered inside Nico. He wouldn't let fear govern them any longer. With a swift glance back, his gaze locked onto Ella's terrified expression. He felt anchored, as if her presence offered him strength. They burst into a glade, sunlight flooding the space, illuminating their surroundings. Nico skidded to a halt, scanning for a place to hide, but the raiders were closing in fast. It was time to face the storm. Ella, breathless, looked at him with fierce determination. Nico's eyes burned with unyielding resolve. "We fight." He knew he couldn't do this alone. They were bound by circumstance, but in this moment they became allies forged through fire. He grabbed a fallen branch, fashioning it as a weapon. Ella took hold of a smaller stick, the weapon too unwieldy for her size, but she stood tall beside him with defiance blazing in her eyes. The raiders emerged into the glade, their menacing figures casting long shadows over the ground. Nico's heart thundered not with fear for himself, but for the girl who stood bravely at his side. He shouted as he stepped forward, prepared to protect her at all cost. The three raiders laughed, but Nico's fierce stance silenced them. In one heartbeat, he charged, wielding his branch with the skill of a warrior. They fought hard, Each strike was filled with a whirlwind of emotions, protective rage, adrenaline, and the lingering promise of hope. Ella stood resolute, surprising herself with her newfound strength, striking at any raider that got too close. This was not just a battle. It was a testament of survival, of resilience, and against all odds they fought together. Yet the fight was brief but intense. Against the forces of chaos, they found themselves pushed onto the ground, pinned by the overwhelming numbers of raiders. Nico grunted, struggling to keep Ella behind him, but defeat whispered bitterly through the air. Then, just as despair threatened to take over, a sound broke through the chaos. It was a war cry, distinct and proud, echoing from the forest beyond. Nico's heart soared. His tribe was coming. The Comanches had ridden to intervene, a wave of strength crashing against their attackers. In moments, the tide turned. The cavalry rushed in, forces colliding in a symphony of chaos. Nico felt renewed vigor coursing through him. This was not just his fight anymore, but the fight of a people connected deeply to the land. Together, they pushed the raiders back, reclaiming control over their territory. In the throes of battle, Nico found Ella once again, pulling her close, sheltering her from the melee as his people fought fiercely around them. He had feared for her safety, but now he felt their power together. That love and courage could bring light even in the darkest of places. Finally, the raiders retreated, a hasty exit marked by the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance. The clearing fell silent, an air of disbelief washing over everyone. Nico, breathless and bruised, turned to Ella, whose eyes shimmered with gratitude and awe, the fear slowly giving way to relief. Then came the moment. Faces emerged from the trees, members of Nico's tribe, eyes filled with a mixture of concern and admiration. They had witnessed the fierce protector, the bond created between a warrior and a child raised by settlers. One of them asked, all laced into his voice. Nico nodded, a fierce pride bubbling inside him. Ella stepped forward, a small figure against the warrior's speech. She faced the tribe, her heart swelling with newfound courage. In that moment, boundaries dissolved, and they shared stories of survival, not as settlers and warriors, but as human beings linked through unexpected events. The night stretched out, filled with laughter and camaraderie as they celebrated the bridge forged between two worlds, one that would echo throughout their shared histories. And as the moon cast its silver glow on the plains, Nico knew he would never be alone again. They had come through the storm together. They found joy in understanding, connection in their differences, and strength in unity. This bond, born out of chaos and conflict, would forever tie them to one another, reminding them both that sometimes, in the midst of darkness, light reveals itself when least expected. The lesson of courage, of the human spirit intertwined with destinies, was now theirs to hold an eternal embrace written in the vastness of the wild Texan landscape. It was a calm evening in the late summer of 1873, when the sun set the sky ablaze with colors that danced over the Texas plains. The gentle rustle of tall grass whispered secrets as the wind swept through, carrying with it the laughter of children playing near a small homestead. Among those children was a young girl named Clara, her golden hair shining like the sun, wrapped in the carefree joy of her childhood. But even in that serenity, destiny was about to intervene in ways that would reshape her life forever. That very afternoon, the horizon darkened with dust. The unmistakable sound of hoofbeats thundered closer, a grim harbinger of the chaos that lurked just beyond sight. Raiders from a rival tribe were on the move, eyes filled with greed and hearts set on violence. Clara's laughter abruptly turned to fear as her mother rushed out of the cabin, urgently calling for her children. Clara! The warmth of her mother's voice was quickly overshadowed by frantic shouts. Clara's heart raced. The world around her shattered into chaos as settlers scrambled to grab their belongings, shouting and pushing. Before she could process the reality of it all, Clara felt a rough hand grab her arm and yank her close. It was one of the raiders, dressed in leather with a savage look in his eyes that sent chills racing down her spine. Panic washed over her like a cold wave. But then, like thunder cutting through the storm, a warrior appeared, a Comanche named Tayanita, tall and fierce, with eyes burning like a fire kindled in the heart of the earth. He had witnessed the turmoil from a distance and felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just a fight for territory. He could see innocence slipping away, a spark of life ready to be extinguished in front of him. With a fluidity that seemed almost graceful, Teianita charged into the fray, drawing his lance with precision. The air shimmered around him, electric with the urgency of the moment. He lunged at the raider holding Clara, a powerful presence that commanded the chaos. The sound of clashing metal rang out, drowning the screams of fear and chaos. Teianita shouted to Clara, his voice sharp and filled with authority. She looked at him, wide-eyed, confused. But there was something in his gaze of fierce protectiveness that ignited a spark of hope inside her. In that brief moment of hesitation, Teianita struck. He took down the raider with a swift move, his body honed by years of survival in the wild. It was as if he understood that life and death could pivot on a single moment, and he was not prepared to let innocence perish here today. Clara hesitated but then felt the urgency of his command. She darted away, propelled by instinct, sprinting towards the woods that bordered the homestead. The world dissolved into a blur of color and sound, a chaotic symphony of survival. From behind, she could hear Teianita fighting valiantly, his roars drowning out the cries of raiders. Beneath the frenzy, Clara's heart pounded like a war drum, the thud echoing with the realization that she was on her own. She dashed through the underbrush, the earth beneath her feet feeling like a pulse, each step pulling her away from safety and into the unknown wilds. As Teianita dispatched enemies one by one, he quickly realized the girl was gone lost among the chaos. Just as he completed his task, he saw her sprinting into the woods, a small silhouette against the towering trees. He couldn't let her face this darkness alone. With sheer determination, Teianita ran after her, his instincts guiding him. Deep in the forest, Clara stumbled, falling to her knees, panic flooding her veins as she looked around. She had never been in the woods alone before. Every shadow felt alive with threat. But then he emerged, a warrior cloaked in shadows, his presence offering a flicker of solace. He commanded, and without thinking, she obeyed. Together they traversed the dense forest. Clara's heart raced, not just from the adrenaline but from fear. She didn't understand why this warrior was helping her. He was from the tribe her family feared, yet he was her savior. As they pressed deeper into the woods, Teianita felt a surge of responsibility. He knew the dangers that lurked in the heart of the wilderness, yet the larger danger loomed in the form of men seeking power, men who didn't understand the sanctity of life. An unbreakable bond was forming, not forged by blood or culture, but by instinct, the raw need to protect what was innocent. Hours passed, and Clara's feet ached. They found an ancient tree with sprawling roots, twisting into the earth like the arms of a guardian. Teianita gestured for her to hide. As she nestled into the shelter, she caught her breath, fear giving way to curiosity. She asked, her voice a whisper, fragile in the stillness. Teianita paused, taken aback by her question. Something about those words struck a chord within Clara. She didn't understand all the complexities of their worlds, but in that moment she felt the truth of his heart. "You could have left me," she mumbled, her eyes big with questions. "But I did not," he affirmed, kneeling beside her. "We must survive this together." As twilight fell, the forest transformed, shadows deepening into the night. Clara watched Teianita, impressed by how he melded with the surroundings, both a part of the natural world and yet distinctly apart. It seemed to her that he moved with purpose, his every gesture filled with a grace that spoke of years spent learning the ways of the earth. In time, hunger gnawed at their insides. Teianita handed Clara a piece of dried meat, sustenance gathered from his own travels. It was simple food, but the act drew them closer. She took a bite, watching him closely, studying the strong lines of his face, the way the moonlight illuminated his dark features. She inquired, unrolling the conversation with childlike curiosity. He hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "To protect my people." Clara pressed, the innocence of her age contrasting against the burden of history that hung heavily in the air. "Because, Clara, every life has value. It is easy to forget that when wrapped in anger." "You are not my enemy," he replied, a calm resolve in his voice. That night the forest hummed with life, the soft sounds of nature enveloping them in a cocoon of warmth. They shared stories, weaving a tapestry of understanding beneath the stars. Clara spoke of her life, the laughter in her home before the violence, while Tayonita shared tales of his ancestors, the spirits that roamed the earth, guarding the balance of nature. As dawn approached, the fear from the day before began to shrink. Clara found herself entranced by his world, the way he viewed life with a raw intensity both beautiful and haunting. In those stories, there was a sense of unity, a blend of cultures she had never considered. Just as the sun began to rise, the crack of branches shattered the moment. They were not safe. Clara's body tensed as raiders burst into the clearing, their laughter cold and cruel, eyes seeking the prize of their earlier conquest. Tayonita commanded once again, a fierce urgency in his voice. With instincts honed by years of necessity, he thrust Clara behind him, ready to confront the oncoming danger. In that moment of fear, Clara felt something shift inside her. Tayonita embodied more than just a warrior. To her, he represented hope. He was both protector and teacher, guiding her through a world filled with threats. With a primal cry, Tayonita faced the raiders, his lance ready, muscles coiled as he prepared for battle. Clara clung to a nearby tree, watching in horror as he fought fiercely, each strike resonating with purpose. For every attack against him, he responded with agility and strength, each motion sharp and calculated. But it quickly became apparent that he was outnumbered. The odds weighed heavily against him, and Clara's heart raced as desperation clawed at her. She felt an urge to help him, a will ignited by a bond that had grown in the shadows of the night. Thinking quickly, she remembered a trick her mother had taught her to remain unnoticed amid the chaos. Clara gathered her courage and crept around, looking for a way to assist the warrior fighting for her life. As the raiders advanced, she noticed a heavy branch lying across the ground. With a deep breath, she lunged for it, her small hands gripping the rough wood tightly. Just as one of the raiders moved to strike Tayonita from behind, she swung with all her might, the branch crashing into the raider's side with a satisfying thud. Tayonita turned, surprise etched across his face as he saw Clara's bravery. In that moment, she was not just a child, she was part of the fight, a warrior in her own right. The raider fell, stunned, and she saw the spark of disbelief in Tayonita's eyes. She shouted as adrenaline surged through her veins. Encouraged by her presence, Tayonita fought with renewed vigor. The two of them became a whirlwind of movement, striking back against the raiders as Clara wielded her improvised weapon, her heart racing with purpose. The energy of the standoff ebbed and flowed. For every challenge, they met it with resilience, running, striking, dodging. Each moment stitched their fates together tighter, two souls battling against darkness, bound by the mere essence of survival. The raiders quickly realized they were facing not just a single warrior but a united force. Their confidence cracked and they began to fall back. Tayonita, sensing victory, used the momentum to his advantage. He roared, charging ahead and driving the raiders away from the clearing, his spirit ignited by the fierce fire of battle. As the last of the raiders fled, Tayonita turned to Clara. Breathless and covered in dirt and sweat, she stood amazed at the turn of events. "You fought well," he said, pride resonating in his tone. "But I was scared," she admitted, the truth escaping before her mind could censor it. "Fear is part of courage," he replied, kneeling to her eye level. For the first time, Clara understood that bravery came in different forms. It wasn't the absence of fear, it was choosing to act despite it. In that moment, they were not just a warrior and a girl. They were allies shaped by the storms they had faced together. With the threat gone, they gathered their breath, leaning against the sturdy trees that had witnessed their struggle. The morning light painted the world in soft hues, a new day dawning over the plains. But as the sun rose higher, a sobering reality washed over them. The violence wasn't over. Tayonita needed to return to his people, and Clara must find her way back to hers. Their paths were destined to part once more. "I cannot stay," Tayonita said, a hint of sorrow in his voice. "But you are safe?" Clara asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "I will go to my tribe," he replied, determination etched into every line of his face. "And you will remember this day." Tears welled in Clara's eyes as understanding sunk in. She had become more than just a girl raised by settlers. She had been given a glimpse into the heart of another culture, the spirit of resilience that existed in all beings, despite their differences. As they stood under the great expanse of the sky, Clara took a step forward and hugged Tayonita tightly. The bond they had formed transcended the borders of worlds that sought to keep them apart. In that embrace, they shared an unspoken promise, a bond forged in the fires of hardship. "Thank you for saving me," she whispered against his shoulder. He pulled back, looking deep into her eyes. With that, they parted, each step heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. Clara turned back toward the homestead, heart filled with a sense of purpose, knowing she would forever carry his lessons within her. Tayonita turned toward the wilderness, ready to face the journey back to his people. And in those moments, beneath the vast sky, they found solace in knowing that no matter the distance, their lives had become intertwined, their stories forever linked through the power of survival, bravery, and humanity. A Comanche warrior and a girl raised by settlers, two lives, forever changed by a single choice to protect, to love, and to fight for the beauty of life. Their stories would live on, echoing through generations, a testament to the truth that courage knows no bounds, and friendship can blossom even in the most unlikely of places. The sun dipped below the horizon, drenching the Texas plains in hues of orange and red, a beautiful facade that hid the storm brewing within. Laughter erupted from a group of settlers' children, all innocent joy drifting in the evening air. Among them was a girl named Clara, her bright eyes reflecting the fading sunlight, unaware of the shadows lurking just beyond the homestead. Suddenly, a thunderous sound rattled the air, the unmistakable thunder of hoofbeats. Clara froze as the settlers' joyous laughter dissolved into screams. A band of raiders rode in like a dark tide, eyes glinting with malice. Clara's breath hitched, fear coursed through her veins like ice. She clutched the wooden toy in her hand, a mere comfort against the coming storm. Chaos erupted. Clara could see her mother, panic-stricken, shouting for the children. Clara's little heart raced as she started to run toward their cabin, but before she could reach safety, a figure appeared in her path, a raider, face masked by terror and greed. Clara's scream pierced the air but was quickly smothered by the chaos surrounding her. And then came another sound unlike the harsh cries and cursing of the raiders, a primal war cry laden with purpose. Out of the dust and darkness emerged a Comanche warrior named Tayonita, tall and formidable, with eyes that shone like polished stone. He had been observing from a distance, the echoes of conflict calling him forth. This was not just another skirmish. He could feel the weight of innocence slipping away, and he would not stand idle. With fluid grace, Tayonita leaped into action, his heart pounding with both urgency and determination. He was no stranger to battle, nor was he unfamiliar with loss. But this time was different. He would protect what little light still flickered in the dark. He shouted as he advanced, driving forward with purpose. The raider holding Clara lunged at him, but Tayonita's blade snapped with precision, cutting through the tension in the air. The raider fell, eyes wide in disbelief, and Clara stood frozen, unsure of whether to feel hope or terror. Tayonita urged, his voice booming with authority. Clara hesitated for only a split second, but the spark in his eyes ignited a fire in her small heart. She turned and fled, darting toward the thick woods that bordered the homestead, each step a fight against her mounting fear. Behind her, chaos reigned. Tayonita fought fiercely, a whirlwind of movement, each strike calculated as he dispatched raider after raider. But in that moment of turmoil, his mind wrestled with the reality he couldn't save them all. He had seen too much pain. Today would not add another innocent life to the list. He fixed his gaze on Clara and could see her small figure silhouetted against the encroaching darkness. She was afraid, but she was also brave, racing toward an unknown future. And that realization ignited something deep within him. He would not let her face this world alone. Navigating through the tangled underbrush, Tayonita sprinted after her, channeling the wild energy of the land that had cradled him since birth. With each stride, he felt the heartbeat of the earth beneath his feet, a rhythm he had come to know and respect. Eventually, Clara stumbled, falling to the ground in a tangle of limbs and panic. Tayonita reached her just in time, skidding to a stop. He looked down at her, wild-eyed and panting, and in that moment he knew they were in this together. "Come," he said, extending a hand to her. He helped her up and they ran deeper into the forest, the sounds of battle fading behind them as they moved further from the danger. Night fell around them, wrapping the world in a thick blanket of darkness. Clara's small hand fell into Tayanida's, and despite her fear, she found comfort in the strength of the warrior beside her. Winding through the trees, Clara suddenly felt the weight of her situation pressing down on her. She whispered, her voice trembling. "To a safe place," Tayanida promised, his tone steady. But even as he spoke, a swell of uncertainty filled his chest. He had ventured deep into the land alone many times before, but now he was not just fighting for himself. He knew the dangers of the wild predators were not just four-legged. As they found a small grove, the stars began to twinkle above, just breaking through the canopy of trees, glittering like distant fires. Tayanida began to build a small fire, a flicker of warmth in the cold night air. Clara sat nearby, her small hands hugging her knees, struggling to contain the storm of emotions within. She asked, breaking the heavy silence. "Perhaps," Tayanida replied, looking into the dancing flames, "but for tonight we are safe." Clara looked into the fire, confused and scared, but also curious about the man who had saved her. "Why did you help me?" Tayanida turned to her, his expression softening. "There is strength in all beings," he said, "and courage. You possess both, even if you do not realize it yet." His words hung in the air, pulsing with an ancient wisdom. Clara studied his face, the sun-kissed skin and foreboding presence. She had only heard tales of the Comanche, painted as savages by those who feared what they did not understand. It was strange now, sitting beside a warrior who was anything but the monster her parents had warned her about. The night wore on as shadows danced around them, and Tayanida shared stories of his people, tales of the spirit world and the balance of nature. Clara listened, entranced. She had never imagined such a world, a place where life and death intertwined, each moment pregnant with meaning. Gradually, Clara felt her fear ebb. As they spoke, the bond forged between them deepened, one built on trust and mutual respect. Tayanida saw her not just as a girl raised by settlers, but as a brave soul navigating a frightening new reality. And Clara began to see him not just as a warrior, but as a protector, a mentor guiding her through the wilderness of her own fear. But even in this fragile moment of safety, danger lurked just beyond their firelight. Tayanida kept a watchful eye on the surrounding darkness. He had learned to read the world around him, each rustle in the bushes, every whisper of wind telling stories of the unseen. As dawn broke, the quiet morning light illuminated the grove. Clara awoke to the sounds of birds chirping, the world outside coming to life. But she sensed the lingering tension in Tayanida, his expression taut as he listened for signs of danger. She asked, her voice still heavy with sleep. "For now," Tayanida replied, standing to gather his gear. "But we cannot linger." They packed quickly, moving as silently as phantoms through the underbrush. Clara's heart thumped in rhythm with every step. They entered a world painted with vibrant hues of green, vibrant with life yet fraught with uncertainty. As they made their way to the river, Clara felt an unexpected surge of strength. With every stride beside Tayanida, she began to recognize her own resilience. She was no longer just a bystander, she was a participant in her own story. But as they reached the banks of the river, they heard a distant echo of shouting raiders, searching for their prize. Clara felt a chill deep in her bones. Tayanida's eyes flickered with intensity, and a silent understanding passed between them. This was no longer just about her safety, but also about survival. "Stay close," Tayanida instructed, and Clara nodded. They moved stealthily along the river's edge, the water flowing briskly beside them, a sound that both soothed and heightened Clara's anxiety. The raiders were near. She could feel it in the air. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes came from behind. Clara's heart raced, and Tayanida instinctively turned, positioning himself between Clara and the sound. But as the figure stepped into view, their tension eased. It was a fellow Comanche warrior named Ashki, a trusted member of Tayanida's tribe. He exclaimed, relief flooding his face. Tayanida welcomed Ashki with open arms, but his attention remained laser-focused on Clara. "This is Clara," he explained. As Tayanida introduced Clara, Ashki looked at her with curiosity. "A child of the settlers in our midst," he murmured, as if it were both a surprise and a great honor. Ashki asked, glancing around, instinctively aware of the threat lingering nearby. Tayanita quickly filled him in on what had transpired. "We can't remain here," he said, urgency edged in his voice. Clara felt her heart sink. It was a perilous move, but she trusted Tayanita. Together, they made a plan to cross the river quickly and quietly, moving with determination. They approached the water, its surface shimmering in the morning light. Clara took a deep breath, stepping to the edge. The river was wide and fast-flowing, a dark torrent that seemed almost alive. She felt a flutter of fear, but Tayanita's reassuring presence steadied her. "We can do this," he encouraged, his voice calm and confident. With a nod, they stepped into the water, and Clara gasped as the coldness enveloped her, wrapping around her legs like a tight embrace. Current pulled and tugged at her, but she pressed forward, trusting both Tayanita and herself. As they crossed, Clara could hear the distant shouting of the raiders behind them. Each sound pushed her to move faster, the fear sparking adrenaline that propelled her forward. Tayanita kept her within reach, his strong hand guiding her, deflecting the water's force. Suddenly, she lost her footing, slipping on the wet stones beneath the surface. Fear gripped her as she stumbled, the water threatening to sweep her away. But in a flash, Tayanita turned, his arms snaking out to catch her just in time. He pulled her back to him, solid and steadfast. He shouted, urgency in his voice as they both pushed against the current with all their strength. With Tayanita's help, Clara regained her footing, and they continued, determination burning bright in both their hearts. They finally reached the opposite bank, collapsed onto solid ground, gasping for breath. Clara looked up, the tension slowly easing from her shoulders. But before they could celebrate their brief moment of freedom, the sound of hooves thundered closer. The raiders had followed them, relentless in their pursuit. Tayanita ordered, adrenaline surging through his veins. They scrambled up the bank, their feet pounding against the earth, racing toward the cover of the forest. With each step, Clara's resolve strengthened. They weren't just running to escape, they were fighting for something greater. As Tayanita pushed her forward, she felt the embers of courage ignite within her. Together, they navigated the tangled underbrush, Tayanita's intuition guiding them. The raiders were gaining ground, but their fear only fueled Clara's determination. They burst into a clearing, and Clara's heart sank. It was an open space, a risk to be seen. Tayanita growled, crouching beside her. But just as they caught their breath, the sound of the raiders' laughter rang out, echoing through the trees. Clara turned to Tayanita, fear etched on her young face. She whispered, her voice trembling again. Tayanita looked at her, determination reigniting in his eyes. He quickly devised a plan, a daring maneuver to turn the tables on their foes. They could use the landscape to their advantage, creating an illusion that could buy them the time needed to escape. Clara nodded, understanding the weight of their mission. As the raiders drew closer, they prepared to sow confusion. Tayanita grabbed a handful of stones and directed Clara to take a position behind a large tree. They would create noise to draw the raiders away from their true location. "Toss the stones at the base of the hill," he instructed. Heart pounding, Clara nodded and readied herself. She threw the stones with all her might, the clattering echoing across the clearing. Tayanita urged, and they darted in the opposite direction, rushing through the trees, holding their breaths as they pressed on, each moment a race against time. The sounds of confusion echoed behind them, a cacophony of shouts and anger as the raiders changed course. Tayanita's strategy was working, giving them a fighting chance. Clara felt the wild rush of freedom wash over her. She was no longer just a scared child. She was part of something bigger, fighting against the shadows that threatened to consume them. Each step felt lighter, each breath gained from the strength of their bond. As they moved deeper into the woods, the raiders' cries grew fainter, replaced by the sounds of nature. Clara and Tayanita finally paused, leaning against a sturdy tree to catch their breath, hearts still racing. "I can't believe we did that," Clara said, breathless with both fear and exhilaration. Tayanita chuckled, the tension lifting slightly. "You were brave, Clara." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, not from fear but from gratitude. For the first time, she felt truly alive, connected to a world beyond her understanding. But as the adrenaline began to settle, Tayanita couldn't shake the nagging fear that lurked in the back of his mind. They weren't safe yet. The raiders could return. It was time to find sanctuary among his people, and he knew it might be dangerous for Clara to venture there. As they continued deeper into the woods, Tayanita made a decision that weighed heavily on him. He needed to get Clara home, back to her family, but in doing so, he risked losing the bond they had formed, a connection he had never expected to find. After a few hours of cautious movement, Clara looked up at him with newfound resolve. "Not too far now. We'll reach the edge of the settlement before nightfall," Tayanita replied, trying to keep the worry from his voice. Clara fell silent, her brow furrowing as she processed his words. He paused, the weight of the question heavy in the air. "You will return to your family where you belong." Their eyes met, a silent understanding blossoming between them. Clara felt a pang in her heart. Tayanita considered her question, a mixture of pride and sorrow intertwined in his chest. "If the winds carry our paths together, then yes." As the sun began to dip low again, painting the sky in fiery colors, Clara felt a swell of both excitement and fear. Her home was close, but the uncertainty of returning felt daunting. When they finally reached the edges of the settlement, Clara's heart raced, nervousness mixing with anticipation. She turned to Tayanita, who wore a serious expression, knowing this moment marked a choice for both of them. "This is where we must part," he said, his heart heavy. Clara felt tears threatening to spill. She cried, the reality of their situation sinking in. "You saved my life." "No, Clara," Tayanita pressed gently. "You owe me nothing. Life has carried us through this journey together, and you are now part of my story." With trembling hands, they shared one final moment, an embrace that spoke volumes, a connection born from terror and courage. Clara held tightly, absorbing his warmth, feeling the strength that had guarded her through the darkest night. And then she stepped back, her heart heavy but resolved. "I will never forget you." With one last look, Tayanita turned to leave, the woods swallowing him. Clara's heart ached at the thought of losing her friend, but whispered a silent promise to carry his spirit with her always. As Clara stepped back into the world she had almost lost, she felt the warmth of the sun on her face, the familiar sense of her homeland enveloping her. But she was changed, no longer just a girl raised by settlers. She was someone who understood the value of courage, the beauty of friendship, and the delicate thread that connected all beings. With newfound strength, she walked toward the settlement, ready to reclaim her life and share the story of a warrior who had saved her, a tale of bravery that transcended fear and uncertainty, forever holding a place in her heart. And just like that, the sun dipped below the horizon, beginning a new chapter in Clara's life, marked by the bond she shared with a Comanche warrior, forever a testament to the power of connection and the resilience of the human spirit. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and red, while the Texas plains stretched wide beneath it, breathing life into the evening. It seemed like a perfect evening at the small settler's cabin where laughter rang out from inside. Clara, a young girl with bright, curious eyes, played with her brothers, their laughter mingling with the chirping of crickets as dusk settled around them. But serenity can be deceiving, and shadows lurked just beyond the homestead, darker than the approaching night. Without warning, the calm was shattered by the distant sound of hoofbeats, growing louder, echoing ominously across the endless plains. Clara's heart raced as her mother burst through the cabin door, her face pale, eyes wild with panic. "Clara, get inside." Clara didn't need to be told twice. She bolted toward the cabin, her small feet pounding against the wooden floor. But before she could reach the door, it swung open and chaos erupted. Raider figures emerged from the dust, their faces hidden but their intentions clear. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. She froze as one of the raiders lunged for her, reaching out with rough hands. Terror gripped her, and in that moment a primal scream escaped her lips, a cry that pierced the still air. But from the swirling chaos, a flash of movement caught her eye. A Comanche warrior, Tayanita, emerged from the trees. Tall and imposing, his presence radiated strength and purpose. He had been tracking the raiders, watching from a distance as they descended upon the homestead, a storm in the making. He rushed forward, muscles coiled like a spring, eyes narrowed in fierce determination. With a fierce roar, he hurled himself at the raider, his lance flashing in the dim evening light. In a heartbeat, the attacker was disarmed, tumbling to the ground in disbelief. Tayanita barked, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. Clara didn't hesitate. She turned and fled, racing toward the safety of the woods. The world behind her erupted into chaos, the shouts of men, the cries of fear blending into a cacophony that seemed to swallow the air. Every step felt like a victory as she dashed into the trees, her breath coming in quick gasps. But she wasn't alone. The mighty warrior was right beside her, creating a path through the turmoil, and she could sense his resolve, a protective fire blazing around him. Tayanita urged, his eyes darting around for more danger as they sprinted deeper into the forest. With each stride, they distanced themselves from the chaos, the sounds of battle fading into the background. At last, they reached a small clearing, and Tayanita quickly scanned the area, ensuring they were free from pursuit. Clara sank onto the ground, her heart racing, lungs burning from their escape. He asked, kneeling beside her, voice low and steady. "No," she panted, shaking her head, still trying to comprehend the whirlwind of events. Just a moment ago, she had been playing in the sunshine, and now the world felt wildly off-kilter. "They will search for you," Tayanita said, glancing back toward the direction they had come. Clara's eyes widened. "We cannot go back," he replied, firm but gentle. Fear, anger, and confusion threatened to spiral within her. Clara protested, tears welling in her eyes. She felt torn between worlds, her family waiting back in the chaos and this formidable stranger who had risked everything to save her. Tayanita softened. "I know it's difficult, Clara, but staying would put you in more danger." As uncertainty washed over her, Clara looked into Tayanita's eyes and saw an unwavering resolve, a determination to protect her at all costs. Something deep within her urged her to trust him, to take a leap into the unknown. So she nodded, determination replacing fear. Tayanita smiled, and in that moment the bond between them formed a connection that went beyond words, born of urgency and understanding. As they moved deeper into the forest, Clara felt the world around her bloom with life. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting intricate shadows on the ground. The air was filled with the sounds of nature, a symphony of rustling leaves and distant birds. But each step still felt like a pulse, a reminder that danger was never far behind. Tayanita led her through the underbrush, navigating the familiar terrain as if guided by an instinct honed over years. With each passing moment, Clara felt more at ease, a sense of safety enveloping her like a warm blanket. They paused for a moment at a serene stream to catch their breath and drink cool water. Clara asked, her curiosity piqued. "Aren't you supposed to be?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Tayanita looked at her, searching for the right words. "Not everything is as simple as it seems," he replied. "We are often painted in broad strokes, but in reality, we are individuals with our own stories, our own paths." Clara nodded slowly, absorbing his words, understanding for the first time that there might be two sides to every story. They each had their own battles, their own burdens, yet here they were, united by a shared experience. As they continued through the forest, the sun reached its zenith, casting dappled patterns on the ground. Tayanita taught Clara small things, how to listen to the forest, how to track the movement of animals, how to identify edible plants. And with each lesson, Clara found herself growing stronger, more confident, embracing the wild world unfolding around her. But each moment spent in this sanctuary came with a weight of sadness. Clara often thought of her family, the laughter of her brothers and her mother's gentle voice. She missed the simplicity of her life, yet with every new discovery, she recognized the freedom inherent in the wilderness. A thoughtful look crossed Tayanita's face as he leaned back against the tree. "I was born on these plains," he began, his voice steady. "My people have roamed this land for generations, hunting and gathering, living in harmony with nature." Clara pressed, genuinely curious. "Because people are afraid of what they do not understand," he replied, a hint of sadness in his tone. Clara felt a pang in her heart, compassion stirring within her. "No, it is not," he agreed. "But wisdom is born from understanding. Your people have their fears and mine have ours." As they spoke, Clara realized how much they shared, two young lives caught in the turmoil of a world that often felt too big and dark. The forest grew quieter as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with strokes of gold. The weight of their conversation lingered in the air, yet the bond between them solidified, a tether forged in adversity. But with nightfall came a new tension. They decided to keep moving, knowing the threat of raiders lingered like a shadow, even in the depths of the woods. Clara's heart raced as the darkness settled around them, the sounds of the night growing louder. They navigated through the trees, Anita leading the way with purpose. Suddenly, Clara's foot caught on a root and she stumbled, falling to the ground with a thud. She gasped, panic lacing her voice. He knelt beside her, concern etched across his features. "I don't think so," she replied, shaking her head but feeling adrenaline spike through her veins. But as they stood, an ominous crack in the silence echoed through the darkness. Anita's body went rigid, instincts kicking in. He hissed, pushing Clara into the shadow of a nearby tree. They crouched low, heartbeats pounding, breaths synchronized as they listened. The unmistakable sound of hoofbeats thundered closer. The raiders had found their trail. Clara gripped Anita's arm tightly, fear coursing through her. "We need to hide," he whispered urgently. They moved quietly, slipping into the dense underbrush, hoping the foliage would conceal them from prying eyes. Anita's heart raced as the raiders approached, their voices rough and harsh, cutting through the tranquility of the forest. "They can't have gone far," one of them growled, frustration evident in his tone. Clara squeezed her eyes shut, her heart pounding too loudly in her chest. Everything she had known felt as if it were slipping away. She could feel Anita's presence beside her, a steady anchor amid the storm. "Stay quiet," he whispered, brushing his fingers against her arm, grounding her in the moment. For what felt like an eternity, they remained concealed, tension hanging in the air like a taut string ready to snap. Clara's thoughts raced, thoughts of her family, of a life before the chaos, of dreams she had yet to fulfill. The world outside felt impossibly vast, and yet in this moment, all that mattered was survival. When the raiders finally moved on, Clara exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. Anita let out a low breath, the tension in his shoulders easing. "They were close," he murmured, his voice quiet but strong. As the dark enveloped them once more, they continued their journey, the moon casting a silver glow on the forest floor. Clara felt her brave spirit reignite. They were alive, they had survived the night. As dawn approached, the tension began to ease, and they found a hidden grove to rest. Clara felt exhaustion wash over her as she leaned against a sturdy tree trunk. Sleep tugged at her eyelids, but her thoughts were heavy. Clara asked Anita softly. Anita considered her question, a distant look in his eyes. "Bravery is not the absence of fear," he replied, his voice steady as the morning breeze. "It's knowing fear exists, yet choosing to move forward regardless." Clara nodded, feeling emboldened or perhaps inspired. She wanted to carry that strength with her, to remember those words as they continued their journey. Together, they continued their movement through the woods, reaching a river that flowed swiftly, reflecting the golden light of the rising sun. They exchanged glances, the moment heavy with possibilities. "We can cross here," Anita said, pointing to a fallen tree that created a bridge over the rushing water. Clara nodded, adrenaline surging through her veins once more. They approached the makeshift bridge, the sound of the water rushing below sending a thrill of fear and excitement. "One step at a time," Anita encouraged, his presence grounding her as they began to cross carefully, placing one foot in front of the other. Clara focused on the balance, her heart racing, overwhelmed by the beauty and danger surrounding her. Halfway across, the tree creaked under their weight and Clara's foot slipped. Panic flashed through her as she teetered on the edge, but Anita's hand shot out, steadying her. "I've got you," he assured her firmly. With his strength, Clara regained her balance. Pushing through, they safely crossed to the other side, breathless with relief and exhilaration. The bond between them had crystallized in that moment, a shared battle against the odds. Once on solid ground, clarity emerged once again. The river sparkled in the sunlight, a living reminder of the journey they had taken together. Clara asked, looking at Anita with hope. "There's a safe camp nearby," Anita replied. As they moved forward, Clara felt a bittersweet pang in her heart. The thought of returning home felt heavy, filled with uncertainty. But she had found something remarkable in this journey: courage, friendship, and the understanding that hearts could bridge divides. They reached the outskirts of the camp, a place alive with voices, where the scent of cooking fires mingled with the sweet of wildflowers. Clara's eyes widened in awe. As they stepped into the camp, Tayanita was greeted with respect, warriors nodding in acknowledgement. Clara felt a sense of wonder, stepping into a world that had once felt foreign. She looked up at Tayanita, feeling the warmth of hope simmering within her. "Welcome," Tayanita said to his people, his voice strong yet inviting. "This is Clara." The warriors nodded, their faces serious but welcoming. Clara felt their eyes upon her, their curiosity mingled with compassion. In that moment, she felt a sense of belonging that stretched beyond the confines of fear. Tayanita took her aside, guiding her through the camp. "Here, you will be safe," he reassured her. "But you must remember the strength you carry inside." Clara absorbed his words, the reality of her surroundings unfolding before her. She would learn from these people, unravel the threads that had woven her fate into Tayanita's. Perhaps understanding would bridge the gap between the settlers and those who had been portrayed as enemies. As days turned into weeks, Clara adapted to life among Tayanita's people. She learned their ways, forged connections, and unveiled stories of courage and resilience. Each day held lessons that transformed her perspective of the world. But the day came when it was time for Clara to return to her family. Tayanita stood beside her, an unspoken bond resonating between them. His steadfast presence and gentle guidance had reshaped her world, transitioning conflict into friendship. "I don't want to leave," Clara whispered, her heart heavy with uncertainty. "You carry my spirit with you," Tayanita reassured her. Tears filled Clara's eyes as she turned to the community she had come to love, the faces of those who had accepted her without question. She felt strong, empowered by the friendships she had built and the lessons woven into her heart. And with a final embrace, Clara stepped away, ready to face the unknown of her past. She would return to her family, but she was no longer just a girl raised by settlers. She was a bridge between worlds, carrying the legacy of a Comanche warrior within her heart. As she ventured back toward the familiar homestead, the sun set behind her, casting long shadows over the path she had walked. And though the world may still be painted in shades of fear and misunderstanding, Clara knew that relationships could blossom in the most unexpected places, a truth destined to resonate for generations to come. The journey had transformed them both, a Comanche warrior and a girl raised by settlers, forever bonded by courage, understanding, and the indomitable spirit of survival. Together, they had learned that the divisions of the past could give way to the connections of the future. And as Clara walked forward, she felt hope bloom within her, an unbreakable thread woven through the fabric of life. A crack of thunder rumbled through the Texas plains as the sun sank low in the sky, painting everything in deep shadows. Within a humble cabin, laughter rang out like music, but the joy quickly turned to panic. Clara, a young girl with wide, innocent eyes, peered out the window, drawn by the sounds of horses thundering across the dry earth. Her heart raced as she recognized the fear in her mother's voice, echoing through their modest home. "Children, get inside." Before Clara could react, the door burst open and chaos descended. Raiders charged into their lives, their faces obscured and their intentions clear. Clara felt her heart pound in her chest, fear gripping her as she turned to look for her brothers. But they were already lost in the tide of confusion, faces of terror shifting like shadows. And then came a deafening war cry, a presence unlike any she had known. Tayanita, a tall Comanche warrior, emerged from the dust like a force of nature. He had been observing the settler camp from a distance, his instincts honed over years spent protecting his people. This was not just another raid. He could see innocence slipping away like sand through fingers, and he was done being a passive observer. With a surge of energy, Tayanita sprinted into the fray, his muscles coiled with potential, his lance ready. He fought through the chaos as if propelled by a storm, moving with the grace of a wolf. Clara watched as he engaged a raider, his movements precise and powerful. The raider crumpled to the ground, his weapon clattering uselessly beside him. Tayanita shouted, his voice steady amidst the chaos. It was a command, not a suggestion, and Clara obeyed. She darted toward the woods, fear driving every step. Behind her, she could hear screams, the sounds of battle growing ever closer. Somewhere in the commotion, her family was disintegrating, but survival was her only thought in that moment. As she plunged into the trees, the world transformed. The towering oaks stood tall and silent, their leaves whispering secrets of ages past. Tayanita followed, carving a path through the wild as they moved deeper into the woods. Clara felt the adrenaline coursing through her, surging with each heartbeat. Everything was a blur, shouts turned into echoes, trees morphed into dark figures, and the ground felt alive. But Tayanita was there, a steady presence at her side, guiding her through the turmoil. "Do not look back," he advised, his voice fierce but soft, a rare combination that put her at ease. Clara nodded, pushing down the fear clawing at her throat. She focused on the strength of the man beside her, who fought not just for survival but for something more. They stumbled upon a secluded glade, the moon hanging low like a watchful guardian. Tayanita brought them to a halt, scanning the area for any signs of pursuit. Clara fell to the ground, breathless, her heart racing like a wild stallion. Tayanita crouched beside her, eyes narrowed, listening intently. "No," she panted, shaking her head, still trying to grasp the whirlwind of experiences that had torn her from the safety of her home. He studied her closely, aware that her innocence was at stake. "Stay with me," he said, nothing but urgency in his voice. Clara nodded, reassurance blossoming between them like a fragile flower. Even in this moment of chaos, she felt something shift. She was not alone. Tayanita had charged into the battle for her. The understanding settled in her heart like warmth on a cold night. As they rested, the night enveloped them, whispering secrets of the wilderness. Clara watched as Tayanita moved with a fluidity that mirrored the flow of the river nearby. She had seen tales of warriors before, but never believed they could be real. This was no hero from a story. He was flesh and blood, a protector who bore the weight of his people's history. She asked, the question slipping from her lips before she could hold it back. Tayanita looked at her, eyes solemn. "Because you are a child," he said. Those words settled deep within Clara's heart. It was simple yet profound. She had grown up hearing stories that painted the Comanche as enemies, yet here was a warrior who had risked everything to save her. With each passing hour, the weight of the world pressed down on them. The distant echo of voices filtered through the woods, a reminder that danger still lurked. Clara felt both fear and resolve swirling within her, a storm of emotions that threatened to burst. Clara asked, the uncertainty pressing against her. "Follow me," Tayanita replied, his voice steady and determined. They set out once more, the trees forming a canopy overhead that whispered the songs of the night. Tayanita taught Clara how to listen, how to understand the language of the wild, to feel the pulse of the earth beneath her feet. She learned the subtle shifts of the air, the signs that would tell her if danger approached. "Your instincts are strong," he would say, his voice full of encouragement. Clara felt a fire ignite within her. Days turned into weeks as they navigated the landscape, avoiding raiders while growing closer with each encounter. Every laugh shared, every lesson learned became another thread woven into the fabric of their bond. But each evening, as the sun dipped low, Clara would think of her home, the warmth of her mother's embrace, the laughter of her siblings. She felt torn, caught between two worlds, each filled with its own dangers and joys. One evening, sitting around a flickering fire, Clara glanced over at Tayanita, who was sharpening his lance. She asked, curiosity filling the air. Tayanita paused, looking up at her. "My life is of the plains, of the tradition passed down through generations. We honor the spirits, understand the land. But you fight back," she said quietly, admiration sparkling in her eyes. "Yes, I fight because my people deserve to thrive." Those words struck Clara like a lightning bolt, reverberating in her soul. They were intertwined now, their fates connected in a way she'd never expected. As days turned into nights, Clara began to feel a sense of purpose igniting within her. She wasn't just a damsel in distress. She was a girl who could stand beside a warrior. She could learn, grow, and become someone who would stand up for what is right. But the sense of calm was an illusion. One fateful day, as they scouted for food, the thunder of horses' hooves shattered the peace. Tayanita's instincts kicked in like a well-tuned machine. He commanded, urgency flooding his voice. Clara's heart raced as she sprinted through the underbrush, her breath quickening as the sounds of pursuit echoed behind her. Tayanita, ever the protector, maneuvered them through the trees, leading her toward a hidden cave they had discovered previously. As they reached the mouth of the cave, Clara felt the adrenaline surge. They dove inside just as the raiders burst into the clearing, their laughter a cruel reminder of the stakes. Tayanita pressed a finger to his lips, urging silence as they huddled together in the shadows. The raiders surrounded the area outside, their voices a cacophony of threats. Clara pressed herself against Tayanita, tremors of fear creeping through her body. "I can't go back home," she whispered, panic rising in her throat. "You will never go back," Tayanita reassured her resolute. "But you must stay strong." Clara clung to that hope, her spirit urging her to trust him, even as the shadows danced dangerously close. Hours passed, the raiders eventually losing interest and wandering off. When the sounds faded into the distance, Tayanita allowed himself to relax. "We need to move quickly now," he said, urgency returning to his tone. They ventured out of the cave cautiously, the woods eerily quiet. The moon illuminated their path, a silvery guide over the treacherous terrain. Tayanita moved ahead, a guardian spirit guiding her through the darkness that felt alive. But as they ventured further, Clara caught a glimpse of lights up ahead, the settler camp, their home. Her heart ached at the sight. It was the very place she had longed to return to yet feared at the same time. "I cannot go back," Clara murmured, the conflict tearing her apart. "I do not know, but we will not let fear hold us captive," Tayanita said firmly. In that moment, Clara realized Tayanita was not just protecting her. He was teaching her to confront her fears, to face the unknown. She took a deep breath, the smell of the earth and the wild surrounding her, filling her with renewed courage. They reached the edge of the camp, a familiar yet foreign terrain. Clara hesitated, a whirlwind of emotions flooding her. Tayanita looked at her, eyes fierce with determination. "Whatever happens, remember who you are." With that, she nodded, gathering what little strength she had left, feeling the weight of both their histories pressing down upon her. As they stepped into the camp, they were met with stunned faces, settlers recognizing Clara, their eyes wide with disbelief. Panic flared as fingers pointed, whispers igniting the air. It was a world she once belonged to but now felt so distant. Tayanita stepped forward, his presence commanding respect. "She is safe. She traveled with me," he announced, voice unwavering. Clara felt the fear spreading through the settlers, but also the glimmers of recognition as she stepped into the light. "I am not a casualty. I chose to stand with him. I learned from him," she declared, heart pounding. Their gazes shifted between her and the warrior standing tall, the weight of their choice in that moment. Could they see beyond their fears? Clara swallowed hard, the courage igniting a fire within her. "I was raised by settlers, but I learned from a warrior." As the words lingered in the air, Tayanita's unwavering gaze pierced through the shadows. He stepped closer, a fierce protector willing to bridge the divide. "Together we can navigate the darkness." A mother stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. She rushed forward, enveloping her child in a warm embrace. The settlers gasped but did not move. Tayanita stepped back, letting Clara have her moment, but his heart felt heavy. He had brought her home, but in doing so, he felt the weight of uncertainty bearing down. Clara asked, her voice rising above the murmurs. In that charged atmosphere, she recognized a spark igniting within her community. Abandoning hatred and embracing understanding could heal the wounds of a conflicted world. One by one, the settlers nodded, the shift palpable. Clara sensed the walls around her heart begin to crumble, replaced by hope. Perhaps they could work toward understanding, learning from one another instead of fearing the unknown. As Tayanita watched, a flicker of pride surged within him. Clara had become a bridge not just between two worlds but two peoples. The bond they had forged served not only to empower her, but to reshape the future that lay ahead. And as the moon climbed higher in the starry sky, Tayanita knew he had fulfilled his duty, not just as a protector but as a mentor who had shown a girl how to stand tall against the shadows. Together, they had faced their fears, confronted the unknown, and in doing so, ignited a spark that could shine even in the darkest of nights. Thunder rolled through the Texas sky, dark clouds gathering like a pack of wolves ready to pounce. In the distance, a single cabin stood small, humble, and filled with laughter. Inside, a girl named Clara played with her brothers, the air thick with the warmth of family and love. But outside, the shadow of danger quietly crept closer, threatening to shatter their joyful world. Suddenly, the sound of thundering hooves filled the air, drowning out the laughter. Clara's mother rushed into the room, her face pale, panic radiating from her. "Get inside." Clara didn't hesitate. She darted toward the door, anxiety clawing at her throat. But before she could reach safety, the door swung open, revealing a group of raiders, faces masked with malice. The world exploded into chaos as Clara screamed, her little heart pounding like a drum. In the heart of the storm stepped a figure, a Comanche warrior named Tayanita, whose eyes flashed with determination. He had been watching from a distance, his heart pounding with every beat of the chaos around him. This was not a battle he intended to ignore. Not this time. With a fierce cry that echoed across the plains, he charged forward. His movements were fluid, honed by years of navigating the wild. He engaged the raiders, his lance glinting in the dim light. The chaos around him faded into a blur as he focused on one goal, protecting the innocent. He shouted at Clara, his voice slicing through the noise as he disarmed a raider with swift precision. But Clara was frozen, fear gripping her. She pleaded, her eyes wide with terror. With a determination born from countless experiences, Tayanita rushed at her, grabbing her arm. In that moment, something shifted in Clara. The courage of the warrior sparked a flicker of bravery within her. She took a deep breath and bolted into the chaos, her tiny legs urging her to keep moving. Tayanita watched as Clara dashed toward the woods, the sounds of battle echoing like thunder in the background. His heart raced, but he couldn't risk hesitation. He fought valiantly, pushing back against the raiders, his focus unwavering. Clara darted through the trees, branches clawing at her clothes as she stumbled, fear coursing through every fiber of her being. She could still hear the chaos behind her, the shouts and the desperation of her home consumed by a sudden storm. Finally, Tayanita broke free from the clamor, sprinting after her. He found Clara standing in a small clearing, breathing heavily, eyes wide with confusion and dread. He urged, taking her hand. They moved swiftly into the heart of the forest, the leaves rustling above them as the world they knew melted away behind. Tayanita led her deeper into the woods, where the sun filtered through the trees, casting speckled shadows on the ground. The forest felt alive, throbbing with energy. Clara's heartbeat began to slow, a small comfort amidst the unknown. She finally asked, looking up at Tayanita with a mix of fear and trust. "To safety," he replied, his voice steady. "We must find a place to rest and plan our next move." Clara nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and fear. She realized in this moment that she was no longer just a girl. She had crossed into a new reality, one fraught with danger yet filled with the promise of survival. Tayanita halted at the edge of a river, its water glistening under the fading sunlight. Here, the world around them felt different. "We can hide for a moment," he said, lowering his voice. As the sun fell lower in the sky and the shadows deepened, Clara could hear the gentle lapping of water against the shore, a soothing melody amid the chaos. She felt a strange sense of peace, the worries of her old life slipping away like the water that flowed before her. But Tayanita remained vigilant, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We must not linger." They trudged along the riverbank, the golden hues of sunset fading to twilight. Clara felt a mix of anxiety and curiosity about this warrior who had fought to save her. She asked, breaking the thick silence between them. "Because you are a child," Tayanita replied simply. His words struck a chord within her, echoing through her heart. It made her think of her life back home, where fears were bred from misunderstanding. She had grown up hearing stories that painted warriors like Tayanita as the enemy, yet here he was, fighting to save her. Their steps were quick and light as they moved deeper into the woods. The air filled with the scent of pine and damp earth, and Clara felt her senses awakening, attuning to the world around her. Tayanita demonstrated how to move quietly, how to listen to the whispers of the wind. "Close your eyes for a moment. Listen," he instructed, and Clara obeyed. The sounds of the forest washed over her, leaves rustling, birds calling to one another, the distant sound of a stream. She asked, her eyes widening in wonder as she opened them again. "It takes practice, but more than that, it takes familiarity with your surroundings," he explained. As the days passed, Clara found herself learning more than just survival skills. She absorbed stories of Tayanita's people, tales steeped in tradition and respect for nature, woven with lessons of bravery, hope, and resilience. One evening, as they settled around a small fire beneath the stars, Tayanita shared a story of his tribe, how they followed the herds across the plains, how they honored the spirits of the land, and how they learned from the seasons. Clara listened intently, a sense of connection binding them tighter. Clara asked after a long silence, her voice trembling slightly. "Perhaps," Tayanita said softly, gazing into the flickering flames, "but returning home may not be the same as leaving. Sometimes, life changes us in ways we do not expect." Clara nodded slowly, contemplating his words, the weight of her past lightening as she felt the embrace of the present moment. Here in the wild, amidst Tayanita's wisdom, she felt more alive and more herself than she had ever felt back home. But the world outside their sanctuary was never far away. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the distant echo of raiders' laughter stirred Clara from her thoughts. Fear crept back into her heart as Tayanita's expression shifted to one of alertness. "The raiders are near," he warned, his voice low and steady. They quickly doused the fire, the light vanishing as swiftly as the afternoon sun. Tayanita led Clara deeper into the trees, moving with the practiced stealth of a shadow. Together they navigated the underbrush, hearts pounding in synchronized rhythm. As they hid among the trees, Clara felt a sense of helplessness wash over her. Tayanita turned to look at her, his expression resolute. "Then we will confront them." The strength in his voice sent a sudden surge of courage through Clara. She might be afraid, but she was no longer alone. In that moment, she understood they fought not just for survival, but to reclaim her sense of identity, a blend of who she was nurtured by her family and who she was becoming alongside Tayanita. The sounds of the raiders grew closer, and Clara held her breath, feeling her heart race. But then something shifted, a rustling, a snap of twigs, and suddenly their world erupted into chaos once more. Clara could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, and Tayanita reacted with the agility of a hawk. He gripped Clara's hand, urging her forward as they dashed deeper into the woods. The pursuit was relentless, the thundering sound of hooves chasing them down like a storm. They reached a clearing, and Tayanita pressed Clara behind a large boulder. "Stay here," he commanded, eyes scanning the area for the threat. Clara protested, fear cutting through her. "I cannot risk losing you," he said firmly. Tears stung Clara's eyes as she nodded, understanding the weight of his words. There was no time for hesitation. Tayanita moved, stepping into the open, drawing the raiders' attention. The chaos around the clearing felt nearly surreal, the cacophony of sound merging into an immovable force. "Hey!" Tayanita shouted, and Clara watched as he confronted the raiders with fierce defiance. In that moment, time warped. The world descended into a blur as Tayanita charged at them, fierce like a mountain lion protecting its cubs. Clara's heart pounded wildly as she stole a glance at her warrior protector. Each movement was a dance. He evaded blows, striking back with skill and precision. The battle felt endless, yet Clara knew she could not just stand by. She was stronger than fear. With a deep breath, she picked up a sturdy branch from the ground and bolted into the fray, her instinct for survival overtaking her fear. Tayanita yelled as he blocked an attack, but Clara wasn't there to hide. She was there to fight. She swung her branch, catching one raider by surprise and giving Tayanita the opening he needed. "Clara!" he shouted, but she felt a spark of hope igniting within her. Fueled by adrenaline, she joined the fight alongside him. Together, they became a whirlwind, a duo born from adversity. Clara swung, striking another raider as Tayanita moved fluidly beside her, their collaboration defying the odds. A visceral sense of power surged through her as she confronted the danger head-on. They fought fiercely, pushing back against the encroaching fear, a testament to their bond forged in battle. But the odds were still stacked against them. Amidst the thrumming chaos, it became clear they were outnumbered. Tayanita's breath quickened. He shouted. Clara felt a surge of defiance rising within her. No, but Tayanita knew they needed strength in survival. With a fierce resolve, he grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the fray. They turned and fled as the raiders howled in frustration, the sound reverberating like thunder. They rushed through the woods, moving faster than they ever had. Clara could feel the weight of the danger close behind them like a predator breathing down their necks. But with Tayanita by her side, she felt invincible. They reached a ravine, the steep incline daunting but necessary. Tayanita urged. Taking a deep breath, Clara followed beside him, leaping into the unknown. As they landed safely on the other side, Clara felt a sense of victory wash over her. They had escaped, but for how long? They continued into the wilderness, the sounds of their pursuers growing fainter. Tayanita led them along the banks of a winding river, his instincts guiding them towards an uncharted path. But just when Clara began to feel the hope bubbling within her, Tayanita halted suddenly, his body tense. She could see the tension etched in his face, a hunter, keenly aware of his surroundings. She followed his gaze and gasped. A raider stood ahead, waiting, poised like a coiled snake ready to strike. Tayanita's stance shifted, muscles tensed as he prepared for another fight. He commanded, but Clara knew that they had fought together before. She couldn't afford to falter now. Summoning every ounce of courage, Clara picked up a nearby stone and hurled it at the raider. It struck with a solid thud, taking them by surprise, and Tayanita seized the moment, charging toward their foe with fierce determination. Together they faced the last raider, a flurry of movement and instinct driving their actions. Clara felt the adrenaline course through her, empowering each of her strikes as they fought side by side. In the end, Tayanita drove the raider back, the echoes of victory ringing in the air as silence enveloped them once again. They stood, breaths heavy, scanning the stillness around them. "We did it," Clara breathed, both exhilarated and exhausted. Tayanita looked at her, respect shining from his eyes. "You fought bravely, but we must keep moving." They pressed on, hearts pounding in sync with the rhythm of the forest. Clara felt transformed. She was no longer just Clara, the girl raised by settlers. She was a warrior in her own right, forged by the trials they had faced together. With each step, the bond between them grew stronger. Each moment of shared experience deepened their connection, the understanding that life was not just about survival, it was about fighting for what truly mattered. As they continued their journey, Clara and Tayanita became more than just protector and protected. They became allies bound by trust, warriors united against darkness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they arrived at a small camp nestled in a clearing. Tayanita breathed a sigh of relief, for this was his tribe's territory, a place of solace amidst the chaos of the outside world. Clara felt a sense of wonder as they entered the camp. People moved with purpose, exchanging stories and laughter that filled the air. She could see Tayanita's people, the Comanche, vibrant and alive. "This is where you will be safe," Tayanita said, his voice calm as he introduced her to his tribe. As Clara met the eyes of each member of the tribe, she felt a warmth wash over her. They welcomed her without hesitation, an acceptance that filled her heart with hope. Together they began to share stories, to learn from one another. Clara spoke of settlers, of the life she had known, while Tayanita shared tales of bravery and honor from his people. Days turned into weeks, and Clara learned the ways of the Comanche, how to ride horses, how to listen to the whispers of nature. With each lesson, she discovered more about herself, her identity widening like the horizon before her. But Clara never forgot the pull of home. She often thought of her family, wondering how they were faring. Would they search for her? Could they understand the journey she had taken? Tayanita sensed her longing, and one morning he approached her. "It is time for you to return to your family," he said gently. Clara felt a pang in her chest, the bittersweet reality swirling within her. She had grown to cherish the bond they shared, the warrior who had guided her through a tumultuous journey. Clara asked, fear creeping back into her heart. Tayanita squared his shoulders, determination shining in his eyes. "You will show them." With those words echoing in her heart, Clara prepared for the journey back. She took one last look at the camp, the people who had welcomed her with open arms. In each face, she saw her own reflection, different yet alike, united by the strength of their shared experiences. The journey home felt different, each step a testament to the growth she had achieved. Clara felt the wind against her face, the sun warming her skin, the earth beneath her feet humming with the promise of new beginnings. When she finally reached the cabin, emotions surged as she spotted her family. Tears fell freely as her mother rushed to her, wrapping her in an embrace that felt like home. "Clara," her mother cried, relief flooding her voice. "I'm back and I'm safe," Clara whispered, breathless, feeling the weight of love surrounding her. As her brothers gathered around, Clara glanced back toward the horizon, a sense of determination filling her. She wasn't just Clara anymore. She was a part of two worlds, bonded by experiences that had transformed her forever. And in her heart, she carried Tayanita's strength, the warrior who had not just saved her life, but had forged her into someone capable of bridging gaps and fostering understanding. Together, they had navigated the darkness, and in the light of a new day, Clara knew that every journey held the promise of connection, of hope, and of the human spirit's incredible resilience. The air was thick with tension, the kind of stillness that clings to the soul just before a storm breaks. Clara peered out from the wooden cabin where laughter had once filled the air, her small heart racing as she watched the horizon. It felt like nature was holding its breath, waiting. Then she heard it, a low rumble that grew louder, a sound that twisted her stomach into knots. Her mother shouted, urgency lacing her voice as she grabbed her daughter's arm. The children scrambled, fear lighting up their eyes. A moment later, Clara's brothers ran past, their faces pale, fear palpable on their small frames. Before the cabin door could close, it burst open and chaos erupted. A band of raiders thundered into the yard, their faces concealed, their intentions clear. Clara's heart pounded like a war drum as realization dawned danger was here, and it felt as if the world had fractured in an instant. Her mother screamed as Clara stood frozen, caught between the warm safety of her family and the icy grip of terror. Suddenly, everything blurred. The sound of hooves pounding against the earth filled the air, drowning out the cries for help. Clara turned and bolted, instinct driving her to flee into the unknown. In the chaos outside, Tayanita, a Comanche warrior, was also on the move. He had been watching the nearby settlement from a distance, the tension in the air weaving knots in his stomach. He felt the pull of the storm, an urgency rising within him as the reality of the raiders became undeniable. He sprang into action, muscles honed from years of defending his people. This moment was no exception. With a fierce war cry that echoed through the air, he charged toward the chaos unfolding at the cabin, focusing solely on one thing, saving the innocent child he could barely see amidst the confusion. Clara felt the world swirling around her as she ran, dodging through the thick brush of the forest. Her heart raced, a mixture of fear and adrenaline guiding her steps. She had seen the raiders before, men shrouded in brutality, but she had never been at the center of their chaos. Her breath came in sharp gasps as she sprinted through the trees, branches snapping behind her. Just as she thought she might burst from panic, Tayanita broke through the brush beside her, his stance wild yet controlled. He commanded, gripping her hand with a strength that felt oddly reassuring. She cried, glancing nervously back toward the cabin, now engulfed in chaos. "I am here to protect you," he said firmly, his gaze scanning the area before urging her to move quickly. Clara hesitated, torn between the instinct to return home and the undeniable urge to follow this warrior into the unknown. But the sounds grew closer, shouts filled with anger and revenge, and she felt the warmth of his hand clutching hers. Something in her shifted. "Okay," she whispered, and together they turned, racing deeper into the sheltering arms of the forest. Tayanita led her through the wilderness, the chaos fading behind them. The world felt alive as the trees whispered secrets, and Clara's fear began to ease. She stole glances at the warrior beside her, his face etched with worry yet filled with purpose. They stopped at the edge of a small clearing, and Tayanita crouched low, drawing Clara close to him. "We must be quiet now," he murmured, his voice dropping to a whisper. Clara could hear the distant sounds of the raiders still searching, the air thick with uncertainty. It struck her then that she had never encountered this kind of fear before, one tinged not with childhood worries but with the weight of survival. She asked, her voice trembling yet curious. "Because they see weakness," Teyanita replied, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the sounds in the distance. Clara took a breath, feeling the tremor of fear still lingering in her chest. Teyanita turned to her, eyes burning with intensity. "That is where they are wrong. You are strong. You've come this far." His words ignited a small flame within her. Clara felt a flicker of bravery surge as she clung to his side, listening to the world around them. She understood that in Teyanita's fierce protection lay the belief that she could be more than just a scared child. As the day turned to dusk, the shadows deepened around them. Teyanita moved cautiously, guiding Clara along the winding path. They navigated the underbrush expertly, inching away from the sounds of retreating raiders. But Clara felt a growing sense of fatigue. Each step weighed heavier as the adrenaline began to fade. She asked, feeling the strength draining from her legs. Teyanita hesitated, glancing at her, then around at the surroundings. "Not yet. We are close to a river." Clara pressed on, but as fatigue washed over her, she felt a twinge of doubt. Would they really find safety? The unknown out here felt more terrifying than the chaos back home. Eventually, they reached the river's edge, its waters flowing steadily, reflecting the golden glow of the sunset. Teyanita knelt beside her, the tension in his eyes momentarily easing. "We can rest here," he decided, scanning the area to ensure it was safe. Clara felt the coolness of the ground beneath her, and for a moment she let the tranquility of the flowing water soothe her. But as she looked at Teyanita, she could already see the hardened lines on his face. Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We move with the flow of the currents," he replied, tilting his head toward the water. "While we rest, we must also prepare for what comes next." Clara watched as he caught the distant sound of horses, the ever-present reality of danger looming like dark clouds above their heads. The bond between them was growing deeper, forged in the fires of their shared experience. That night the stars twinkled overhead, and for a moment Clara could almost forget the danger that surrounded them. They shared a meal Teyanita had foraged, laughter mingling with the sound of the river flowing beside them. "Tell me about your life," Clara urged, curiosity shining in her eyes. Teyanita leaned back against the mossy ground, gazing up at the sky. "I was raised among my people, the Comanche. We roamed these plains, learned from the land." Clara pressed. "Now my people are under threat. The world has changed, and we must adapt or face the consequences," he said, his voice steady yet tinged with an underlying pain. Clara absorbed his words, feeling an unexpected connection forming between them. This was not just a story of survival. It was a story of understanding, of two worlds colliding, both shaped by pain yet bound by a shared desire for safety. As dawn broke, the world around them felt new, fresh with possibility. Clara and Teyanita readied for the next leg of their journey, moving quietly alongside the riverbank, where the morning light painted the landscape in soft hues. Together, they forged ahead, shaping their destinies through the challenges they faced. But just as Clara began to feel a sense of hope blossoming, a low rumble broke through the tranquility of the morning. The sound of galloping hooves echoed from the direction they had come, sending a chill racing down her spine. Teyanita commanded sharply, urgency flooding his voice. They ducked behind a thick cluster of bushes, hearts pounding as they held their breath. Clara could see the raiders approaching, 4 of them, riding hard as if fueled by a relentless fire. Her heart raced as they thundered past, but she felt Teyanita's presence beside her, a fierce protector willing to sacrifice anything to keep her safe. Clara whispered, fear clawing at her chest. "We wait," he replied, his voice low and collected. As the raiders rode by, Clara's pulse quickened, each heartbeat thudding in her ears. She felt a sense of defiance rising within her, a belief that she didn't need to cower in fear but could stand strong against the tide of danger. As soon as the last raider was out of sight, Teyanita released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "We cannot stay here." They scrambled to their feet, moving cautiously along the bank. Clara felt a new energy swelling within her, each step ahead fueled by a determination to fight for her place in this world. But just as they pressed forward, the air crackled with danger yet again. Clara craned her head over her shoulder, sensing something amiss. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a clearing that opened before them like a trap set for unwitting travelers. "Stay close," Tayanita commanded, and they cautiously stepped into the clearing, feeling the silence weigh heavily around them. The vastness felt eerie, and Clara could feel the tension in the air around them, coiling ever tighter. She whispered, scanning the surroundings. Before Tayanita could respond, the unmistakable sound of galloping horses filled the air once more, but this time, it was accompanied by the harsh laughter of the raiders. They were back, having circled around, tracking them like predators. Tayanita ordered, pointing to a low rise in the earth. They sprinted toward the cover it provided, hearts racing in synchronized beat. But Clara could hear them. The raiders were closing in, their voices growing louder. Tayanita gripped her hand, urging her to move faster as they climbed over the ridge. Just as they reached the top, Clara dared a glance back. The raiders had arrived at the edge of the clearing, their eyes scanning for movement, like wolves on the hunt. Clara's stomach dropped as she realized they were trapped. "We can't go back," she whimpered, the fear rising again, threatening to swallow her whole. "We won't," Tayanita declared, a fierce light igniting in his eyes. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, Clara and Tayanita prepared to defend themselves. They waited, heartbeats echoing in the silence surrounding them. The raiders were just below, oblivious to the two figures watching them from the ridge. Then, in a heartbeat, everything snapped into motion. Tayanita leaped from the ridge, crashing down like a thunderstorm. Clara, fueled by a surge of courage, followed. Together, they descended into the chaos below, the ground shaking beneath their feet. As they landed, the raiders looked up, surprise flashing across their faces. Tayanita surged forward, launching into the fray, a whirlwind of motion and strength. Clara joined him, adrenaline transforming her fears into raw power. The clash of bodies and human persistence echoed across the clearing. Clara swung her arm with newfound confidence, fearless against the raiders who had once seemed insurmountable. Tayanita fought beside her, relentless in his defense, each move calculated and powerful. As chaos engulfed them, Clara felt the energy shift, the realization that she was no longer just a girl fleeing for her life. She was a part of this battle, a protector fighting for her own freedom. But as the fight continued, the odds began to turn. No matter how fiercely they fought, the raiders outnumbered them. Clara felt her strength wane, fatigue creeping in as desperation clawed at her heart. And just when hope seemed fleeting, a piercing war cry pierced the air, the unmistakable sound of Tayanita's people rushing to join the fight. The pack descended upon the raiders like a storm, a surge of warriors who understood the stakes of the battle. Clara watched as they flowed like water, merging their strength together, and suddenly, they were no longer alone. With renewed vigor, Clara joined her newfound allies under the chaos. They fought fiercely, each move echoing the determination to reclaim their freedom. In that moment, everything shifted. The tides of battle turned toward victory. As the last raider fell, Clara stood tall amidst the chaos, breathless but unbroken. She had fought alongside warriors, and in those fleeting moments of unity, she recognized the power they held together. But just as victory began to settle in the air, the shrill cry of a horn blared in the distance. The remaining raiders had retreated, but a more formidable threat loomed on the horizon. Shadows darted, and Clara's heart dropped as fear crept back in. Tayanita shouted, urgency lacing his voice. But as Clara turned, she felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. Something larger than any threat she had faced before was now imminent, and they stood on the precipice of a new unknown. Would she take the leap into this new reality, where fear and courage intertwined, or would she fall back into the shadows? The choice loomed heavy in the air, and Clara recognized she had already crossed a threshold. Realizing she was no longer just Clara, the girl raised by settlers. She was a warrior forged in the fires of battle, destined to face whatever came next. And as the horizon darkened with impending danger, she took a step forward, ready to embrace her fate, unbroken and alive. Little did she know that the true test was waiting just beyond that very moment, where the past and present would collide in ways far beyond her imagination.